A blade stops, inches from a warlord's throat, and he's grinning. The man holding that sword isn't Japanese, he's African, and every samurai in the room is staring. You're looking at the man about to become the first foreign-born samurai in history. His name was Yasuke, and nobody in Japan had ever seen a man like him. Just months earlier, he'd arrived as a servant, not a warrior. People in Kyoto were so stunned by his dark skin, they started a riot just to see him. One man was crushed to death that day, just trying to get a look, and the most powerful warlord in Japan wanted to meet him personally. That warlord was Oda Nobunaga, the man clawing his way toward ruling all of Japan. Nobunaga had a reputation for being ruthless, brilliant, and almost impossible to impress. So when Yasuke walked in, Nobunaga didn't believe what he was seeing. He thought the ink on Yasuke's skin was paint, and ordered servants to scrub it off. When nothing came off, Nobunaga just laughed, and got even more curious. He asked Yasuke to speak, and was stunned again. The man understood Japanese. Then he asked him to show his strength in front of the entire court. Yasuke lifted a grown man off the ground like he weighed nothing. The entire courtyard went silent, then erupted into stunned applause. Nobunaga decided, right there, that this man would stay close to him. But nobody, not Nobunaga, not Yasuke, knew how far this would go. Because within 1 year, this former servant would be handed a sword of his own. Yasuke's story actually started thousands of miles away, likely in Mozambique or further south. He was taken young and passed through the brutal machinery of the slave trade. Eventually, he ended up serving a Jesuit missionary named Alessandro Valignano. Valignano brought him along on a mission, straight into the heart of feudal Japan. Yasuke wasn't just tall. Reports say he stood well over 6 feet, towering over most men there. In a country that had never seen a black man, he became an instant sensation. Word of him spread from town to town faster than the missionaries could travel. And that word eventually reached the one man who ruled by fear and ambition. Nobunaga summoned Valignano to the capital and told him to bring his servant. That single request would change Yasuke's life forever. After that first meeting, Nobunaga couldn't stop talking about him. He gave Yasuke a name, a place at court, and something almost no foreigner ever got: trust. Within months, Yasuke wasn't just an attraction, he was Nobunaga's personal attendant. He carried Nobunaga's weapons, walked beside him in public, ate at his table. For a warlord obsessed with strength, Yasuke had become something rare, a symbol. But symbols in feudal Japan came with expectations, deadly ones. Nobunaga didn't just want a companion, he wanted a warrior. So he ordered Yasuke trained, in swordsmanship, horsemanship, everything a samurai needed to know. This wasn't ceremonial. One mistake in battle, and he'd die like any other soldier. And Japan, in the 1580s, was tearing itself apart in civil war. Nobunaga was in the middle of the most violent campaign of his life. He was trying to unify the entire country under one ruler, himself. And he wanted Yasuke close, not as a servant anymore, but as a soldier. In 1581, Nobunaga made it official. He granted Yasuke a house, a stipend, a ceremonial sword, and the rank of samurai. For the first time in recorded history, a foreign-born man held that title. Not an honorary title, a real one, with land, pay, and duty attached. Some samurai respected it. Others were furious a foreigner wore their armor. But Nobunaga didn't care what anyone thought. He made the rules. And for a while, Yasuke's life looked like something out of legend. He rode beside one of the most powerful men in Japanese history. He carried Nobunaga's own spear into battle formation. But storm clouds were gathering, and not just over the battlefield. Nobunaga had enemies everywhere, some of them closer than he realized. One of his own generals was quietly turning against him. His name was Akechi Mitsuhide, and betrayal was already in motion. In June of 1582, Nobunaga was resting in a temple in Kyoto, guard down. Yasuke was there with him, close enough to be one of the last men standing beside him. Outside those temple walls, thousands of soldiers were closing in, and Yasuke was about to find out exactly what being a samurai really cost. The temple gates burst open, and there was no warning left to give. Akechi Mitsuhide's soldiers poured in by the thousands. Nobunaga barely had time to grab a weapon. He fought back from a doorway, but the numbers were impossible. Yasuke stood his ground right beside him, sword drawn. Flames were already climbing the temple's wooden walls. Nobunaga knew there was no surviving this. So he retreated deeper into the temple and made his final choice. He took his own life rather than be captured. Yasuke was still outside those burning walls, still fighting. He didn't run. He held the line for the son Nobunaga left behind. But that fight, too, was already lost. Eventually, Yasuke was captured, exhausted but alive. Mitsuhide's men didn't know what to do with him. He wasn't Japanese, he wasn't a lord, but he'd fought like a samurai. Mitsuhide reportedly said Yasuke was not a Japanese man and spared him. He sent him back to the Jesuits, alive but stripped of everything he'd earned. No title, no stipend, no sword of his own anymore. The man Nobunaga had raised up in one single year was gone in one single night. And here's the number worth remembering. It took exactly 1 year to make him a samurai. 1 year, from stunned servant to sword-carrying warrior at a warlord's side. Nobody before him had ever done that. Nobody after him would for centuries. After that night, Yasuke simply vanishes from the records. No death date, no grave, no final chapter written down. Some say he returned to the missionaries and left Japan for good. Others believe he stayed, quietly, for the rest of his life. Either way, the records just go quiet, like he was never meant to be explained. For 400 years, his story barely existed outside a few scattered diaries. Historians only pieced him back together in the last few decades. And once they did, the world couldn't stop asking the same question. How does a man go from captive to samurai to legend in one single year? Nobunaga saw something in him nobody else in Japan was willing to see. Not a curiosity, not a servant, a warrior worth trusting with his own life. That trust outlived Nobunaga himself in the only way that mattered. In a story with almost no confirmed facts, one number still stands untouched. 1 year. That's all it took to make history. Today, Yasuke shows up in games, novels, even feature films. But most people telling his story never learn how it actually ended. No triumphant final battle, no grand goodbye, just silence and a burning temple. And maybe that's exactly why his story still pulls people in. It's not a myth with a clean ending. It's a real life, cut off mid-sentence. A man erased from most history books, but never fully erased from Japan itself. If you go looking, there are still shrines that whisper his name. And if you know where to look in Kyoto, you can still walk his path. This channel exists to find people exactly like him, the ones history almost forgot. If that's the kind of story you want more of, subscribe. A new animated history documentary every Saturday. Because Yasuke wasn't the last outsider to change history from the inside. There were others, quieter, stranger, almost as impossible to believe. Some crossed oceans in chains and ended up commanding armies. Some walked into royal courts as prisoners and walked out as advisors. Every one of them left footprints historians almost missed, and every one of them started exactly like Yasuke did, as someone nobody expected to matter. So the question isn't really how Yasuke rose so fast. It's how many stories just like his are still sitting, forgotten, in some dusty archive. Because for 400 years, Yasuke was one of them. 1 year made him a legend, 4 centuries almost made him disappear. We only found him again because someone refused to stop asking questions. Somewhere out there, another name like his is waiting the exact same way. And next time, we're going to go find it. Because history's still got names it hasn't told you yet.